Welcome to everyone, and a special warm welcome to Claire King-Lassman and Mohammed Fahili, known as Fahili, from the Akko, a very, really special place that Terry and I have visited. And there are people here today who have been with me and the Reverend Keith McNichol in 2019 to visit the centre. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jenny Nemko, the founder of TalkMatters. And TalkMatters is now celebrating. We're celebrating our first year with a medley of a compilation of all the inspirational people that we've met over the last year. We've been sending out weekly clips, and we're going to, in the next couple of weeks, send out the full medley with the hope that you'll be able to pass this on to friends and colleagues so that more people can get to know what we're doing. Really, the situation doesn't seem to improve, but the initiatives that TalkMatters supports are as important now as ever in helping as many Jews and Arabs as possible to meet and build up the trust that's necessary if a political situation is ever to get off the ground. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. Fahili and Claire will be speaking to us, and then we'll have a question and answer session. If you can write your questions in the chat box, I'll read them out. And we hope to finish by about 7:15 UK time. But Fahili and Claire have said that they'll kindly stay on for a little bit longer. For those of you who'd like to say hello to them, who've met them before, that would be great. Now, let me introduce Claire and Fahili. First of all, the very modest Claire. Impossible to get her to write much about herself, but I can tell you she's a really lovely person who's worked tirelessly with Fahili over many years. I'm looking forward to Claire telling us about the centre, how she got involved with coexistence projects, and what that, as an English Israeli Jewish person, means to her. And now, for as Claire always says, the main man himself, Fahili. Fahili has dedicated his life to Arab-Jewish coexistence. In 2000, Fahili received an award at the Knesset in honor of his work. In the same year, he was invited to a conference at the UN in New York, where he was Israel's only Arab representative. He sits on the board of Akko's Arab High School. But now let me shut up and let Fahili tell us his amazing life story. Thank you. Over to Fahili.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mohammed Fahili, and everybody calls me Fahili because there is a lot of Muhammad names in the Muslim, people. And Fahili, it's only a family name, and everybody calls me Fahili. I'm gonna make my story short because I don't have time. Because my story is, if I wanna tell it exactly, I need about 45 minutes, but I'm gonna do it in 10 minutes. I was born in the Akko in 1956, and I was born to a poor family who lived in Akko. I was born after 6 girls. I was the 7th one, the first boy in the family. And after 6 years, my brother was born. And after 40 days, my father died, and he left my mother with 8 children by herself. And you can imagine we become a very, very poor family, and people help us all the time to keep going on. 2 of my oldest sister left the school and went to work to raise a family. And when I was 13 years old, I had a chance to work in a kibbutz close to Akko called Ein HaMefrat. It was the first time for me to meet Jewish kids in the kibbutz. In the old city, we had Jews, but Jews who came from Arab countries. But for me in the kibbutz, all the kids, they were Jews who came from Europe. They spoke only English and Hebrew. And it was the first experience for me to start working with Jewish youth. After a while in the kibbutz, they knew about my family, and we are so poor a family. They decided to help me and help my family. And before that, one day, I discovered a youth movement in the kibbutz called Hashomer HaTzair. I asked permission if I can be one of the group, and they said okay, and they give me a blue shirt, and I start going 3 days after work to be with the youth in the club. And in the kibbutz, they knew about my family and they decided to help me. They start giving me every Friday a lot of food to take to the family. Before that, we used to eat twice a year meat, only in the holiday, where the rich people sacrifice and give the poor people meat. This is the only way we had meat. But when the kibbutz start giving me a food, we had plenty of meat, plenty of food, too much food. And after 2 months, I returned back to school, and I kept to go 3 days to be with the youth in the club. And also, I wanted the food to come to my family every week. And my mother, she said, we had too much food, and she started selling the meat and the fish in the market. And I told the kibbutz about it, and they start giving me more food. They said, if it's help, take more food and tell your mother she can sell the food in the market. And I spent 4 years in the kibbutz. During the 4 years, with the money my mother made, she sent two of my sisters to study in the university, one in the University of Haifa to be a teacher, and one to the English hospital in Nazareth to be a midwife. And it was the first two Arab girls who left Akko and went to study in university and high education. And also my mother, during the 4 years, she raised some money, and she went, and because the house we were living in, this house, it was for the government, and my mother, she was afraid, and she went and she buy our house. And after 1974, I finished my high school, and I went back to Akko. All my friends, they were Jews. They went to the army. I couldn't enjoy the army. And my mother, she believed in education, and she wanted me to get education, but I couldn't make it in Israel. It was so hard and difficult to accept an Arab guy in 1974 to study as engineering. And my mother, she encouraged me to go with my friend. They left to America to study. And she said, don't worry, we had money. You can go and you study. And, I left Israel in 1974. I went to Houston, Texas. I start, learning in the college, and I start working as a waiter. During my working, and start working in a fancy hotel, in 5-star hotel as a waiter. And one day I saw the owner who came to the restaurant with his kids, a Jewish guy. He came to he's making the kiddush in the restaurant. And I went to the table and I told him Shabbat Shalom in Hebrew. And he said, Shabbat Shalom, you speak Hebrew? I said, yes. Where are you from? He said, from Akko, from Israel. He was in Akko, he loved in Akko. In a while, few months, I became the waiter of the family. And he asked me to teach his kids Hebrew every Sunday when they are not going to school. And I start going to his house every Sunday to teach the kids. Suddenly, I become the babysitter of the kids. And he gave me a car, he gave me American Express, and he said, stop, go to the restaurant every day, just be with the kids during the week. Only in the weekend, you can go and work in the restaurant. And, for me to have money and car from him, it was so excited. And after 6 months in the Rosh Hashanah, he invited me to the house. And he said, Fahili, we decide to help you and help your family. And, I used to rent apartment. I used to pay $500 for the apartment. He said, this money, you can send it to your mother. We are going to give you a room in our hotel. You can stay in our hotel and you can live there for free as much you want. I moved to the hotel. I started sending money to my mother. She sent another to my sister to study in the university, one in Haifa and one in Tel Aviv. And after a year, David decided to pay the whole cost for the university for me also. And he paid for 3 years. And I spent 4 years and a half with the family. After that, I told him, I have to go back to Israel. My family needs me. I finished study. And he made me a party. And the next day, he took me to the airport. In the airport, he gave me an envelope. And he said, this money from the family for the 4 years. I said, what's that? It was $5,000 cash money. He said, this money, you can go back to Israel and make your dream to buy a house in our apartment in the Bolson neighborhood in Akko. It was the first Jewish neighborhood was built outside of the old city. For me as a poor child was a dream to buy apartment in this area. And he said the best apartment costs $5,000. Take this money and start a new life. And I returned back to Akko. I got married. And I told my wife, because of David, because of the people in the kibbutz, we are, 5 people educated from the family. Only two of my sisters, they didn't go to school. My brother, he's engineering. My one of my sisters, she's a doctor in America, and the family doing well. And I told her, these people, they changed my life. And because I was poor child, I decided to focus and to work and help the poor kids in Akko, Jews and Arabs. And the neighborhood, I lived that time, it was a bomb shelters in the neighborhood. I took permission from the mayor and I opened the bomb shelter as a club for the kids, Jews and Arabs. And we start, help them with homework. We bought a games to play, to spend 3-4 hours every day. Some of the neighbors, Jews and Arabs, they came and they start help me because we're all volunteers, just to give support for the poor kids. Until one day we had visit from Clore Foundation, then Vivian Clore, she came to Akko and she came to the neighborhood. She wanted to see Jewish Arab mixed neighborhood. And she came to Akko and she said that kids in the bomb shelter, she went inside and she asked me why I'm doing it. And I told her my story. She got excited and she decided to help. And I told her I have a dream to build a Jewish Arab community center, independent, not belong to the city, not belong to the government, because I don't want them to control it, because I want to work with the poor kids. We have in Akko, we have 4 community centers belong to the city, but only people can afford it, Jews and Arabs. Poor kids, they cannot go to the Jewish community centers. But in our community center, I focus with the poor kids to help them and give them what they need. And they give us money. We built the first floor on top the bomb shelter in 1993. And we start working every day with the kids in the neighborhood. Many people, they wanted to come from outside to the center, but we didn't have enough place for them. And also we made an association and we start, raising money from the New Israel Foundation. They give us for 3 years. The Abraham Foundation, they give us money, and Van Leer, they give us money. And we apply one more time to the Clore Foundation and they give us another extra money to build another 2 floors. In 2000, we built another 2 floors. And since that time, we opened the center for the whole people in Akko, especially for the poor kids, Jews and Arab, and especially new immigrants. In Akko, we have 1/3 of the people, they are new immigrants from the Soviet Union and from the Caucasian mountains. They are very poor families, and also the Arab. And the Jews who stayed in Akko, it's Jews who came from Arab countries. Also, they are poor, they are not educated. And, I wanted to focus with these kids, with these families. And we opened the doors for the whole people. And since that time, all the time I was volunteer. For 9 years, I was volunteer until we built the 2 floors. And the Clore Foundation asked me to run the center with full time. And I told them I have to go and make like a course to study how to management. And they paid for a year in the University of Haifa to study management. And since that time, I start work full time in the community center. And this is my story. This is my community center. This is my life. I spend every day 12 hours in the community center. Just, I come home to break for 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, have a lunch, and go back to the center because we don't have enough money to hire people. Today we have 28 workers in the community center. Some of them was a full time, and some of them was half time, and some of them per hour. We have about 600 kids, Jews and Arabs. The majority, they are like poor kids, 60-70% they are poor kids, and we have 20-25 middle class and rich people also come to the center. We encourage the people to be together, poor and middle class and rich people in the same room, in the same class, the same education. And we don't, focus, these are Jews, these are Arabs, these are Muslims, these are Christian. Everybody welcome to come to the center. We don't talk political, we only focus with education. Through the education, we make meetings with the families and with the kids, and we make trips 3 times a year, and we have parties like in Russia, in Sylvester, we have party, everybody, and we have Purim. We have all the kids, they dress in the Purim and we make party. And in Ramadan also, we make a party in Ramadan for the Muslim and the Jews and the Christian. And during around the programs and the meeting, we make the meeting with the families and the kids.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you. And now over to Claire.
So I'm Claire. You can all hear I'm a Londoner, and it's really, I grew up in the Jewish community in London, and it's really lovely to see Sharon Goldstein because she ran the summer school I used to go to as a kid, which is amazing. When I look at you, Sharon, it's not possible. So that's really very lovely. I grew up in the Jewish community, was very involved. I came to Israel for the first time when I was 15 and sort of fell in love, as you do. Came back for a year to do a program for youth leaders, and fell in love even more with the country. And then came to live here, married and came to live here, came back to England for many years. And then after about 20 years working with my husband, who's Israeli, in England, we decided to take a sabbatical here. That was about 15 years ago. This is the longest sabbatical in history. And the idea was that we wanted to give our children a little bit of their kind of Israeli background. And I just saw a question, which I'm going to answer. I really shouldn't. Yes, Sharon's husband, Sharon's son is a rabbi in Northwood, and Sharon's husband was a rabbi in Northwood. So yes, I just saw that question. Anyway, so we came to Israel. We wanted to volunteer in, for want of a better word, peace projects. And my family said, you absolutely have to meet this terrific guy. They had been supporting the center for years. And so towards the end of our sabbatical, I met Fahili. I heard the wonderful story that you've just heard. And I was really taken with him. And we had decided that maybe the sabbatical would go on one more year. And when he said, could you help with fundraising? Because I had been involved I'd worked for Jewish Care for 10 years. I'd been involved in the Jewish community fundraising for many years. And although I swore I wasn't going to fundraise again, meeting this man and understanding the importance of the project, I just said, okay, I'll give you a couple of months' help. How long ago was that, Fahili? 14 years ago?
Yeah.
Anyway, and the question is why, why 14 years later am I still involved with this project? And I think it's there are several reasons for me. Akko itself is an amazing place. It's right in the north of Israel, for those of you that don't know. It's one of the few mixed cities in Israel. And I kind of say these things because I forget that they're not normal in England. So in Israel, people live separately, generally. You have Jewish towns and Arab towns and Jewish villages and kibbutzim, and it's generally separate. I hate to use the word segregated, but certainly separate. And places like Akko are very, very unusual. There are a few mixed cities where they have Jewish and Arab population, usually quite separate within the city. Why Akko is very different is because where Fahili lives, for example, his neighbor it's a flat, there's a neighbor who's Jewish, and downstairs is Jewish, and here's an Arab. So it really is connected. And I love the idea of a city where people really had a similar experience that we have in England, which is that we live together, that our children know each other, that they speak the same language. In Israel, children generally don't go to the same schools. You have Arab schools and Jewish schools. In the Arab schools, they speak Arabic. In the Jewish schools, they speak Hebrew. Generally speaking, any kind of community centre activity will all be in Hebrew, unless there happens to be an Arab community centre, in which case they'll all be in Arabic. So it was really amazing to come across a place where everybody who was there for the simple reason that it was very good. It offered, we didn't even talk about the services that are offered, but just very, very briefly. 6 days a week, there's a daycare centre for 75 children up to the age of 3. This is a completely unregulated area in Israel, and there are some pretty awful places out there. Fahili's centre is fantastic, high quality, very high ratio of adults to children. And people just come there because they need a place that's good and affordable. And as a result of that, you have Jewish kids and Arab kids. The families are not sending their children because it's a mixed community centre, because it's a mixed facility. They're sending them there because it's cheap and good. And I sort of call this, I call it kind of an unintentional community. They are generally people from low socioeconomic backgrounds. They are generally people who would never think much about politics, certainly wouldn't think about what I call coexistence, or you can call shared society. There are all sorts of names. One of the things Fahili said to me right at the beginning is, we don't coexist here, we just exist. And that really, really spoke to me a lot. The families that come in there just are. They just play and they just dance and they just do karate and they just learn. And they come to the place because it offers something they can't find elsewhere. But through the experience, the children and the young people just get to know each other. They get to understand that they have much more in common than separates them. And this is all in the context of a country that really, I don't want to get political here, but let's say fear is a currency that has been used too much, maybe all the time, but particularly recently. And separation is the norm, and fear of the other is the norm. So it's really rare to have this incredibly normal community centre. I mean, it would be incredibly normal anywhere in the world, but in Israel, it's incredibly rare. And I think the more time that I've spent here, the more I realize that the only way that things are going to get better here is if there are grassroots projects that show children that being together is normal. And actually one thing I find quite interesting is the daycare facility was originally, they were all Arab kids. And so all of the carers were Arab carers who spoke Arabic. And slowly, Fahili talked about the Russian families. The Russian families started to come because they saw it was good and they knew they could afford it. And they also sent their children because they spoke Arabic there, because they felt that the children will know Russian because they speak Russian at home. They will know Hebrew because they're going to go to Jewish schools, but they'll never learn Arabic. So by sending their children there, they're going to learn Arabic. And I think that's also very interesting in terms of, you know, people who really value education are sending their children there to learn another language. So yes, I have been there a long time. I am deeply honored to work with Mohammed Fahili. He's a terrific man. He has a beautiful story, but he's also, he's really a true man of peace. And being there 14 years, we've been through many different conflicts in this country, sadly. And each time he offers a perspective to me that is like, it's about the human beings and it shows the human side of it. And sometimes it also teaches me a lot. And I feel very, very honored. I feel very honored also because we have friends around the world, particularly in the UK and the US, who see supporting our centre and being friends with the centre as a way to do their bit on the ground out here. And we're very grateful. And this is very much part of it. Jenny, we've known you over many years. Some of the people here we've known over many years, and we're really lucky and happy. So Jenny, I'm going to be quiet now, but I'll go over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to ask a slightly harder question, but before I do that, can I ask anybody who wants to ask a question to please write it in the chat box, and then I will read it out. Okay, so if anything strikes you, anything at all, I'm sure Fahili and Claire will be happy to respond to you. So what I want to ask Fahili is that the recent erection of a fence on the beach in Akko, it was put up and then it was taken down. And I'd like to know more about that, what the context of that, why did that happen? And why did it go up and why did it come down? If you could tell us a little bit and perhaps put it into a bigger context. Thank you.
It's happened like 2 months ago. The government, they decide to give the Palestinian people in the West Bank, not in Gaza, Palestinian people who live in the West Bank, permission to come to Israel. People, they never been in Israel. When they give them the permission, thousands of thousands, they start coming to Akko. Because, they go to Jerusalem, they go to Haifa and Akko. And when they are coming to Akko, we have very, very beautiful beach. And it's open beach for everybody, free. And people, they start going to the beach. And the Jewish people in Akko, when they saw every week more than 5,000-6,000 people come to the beach from morning until evening, and they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all, and they start, complain to the mayor, and the mayor, he decided to close the beach, and he said only people had vaccinated, they can go to the beach, but they didn't do it for all people. They start, stop the buses who came from the West Bank and let them return back. They didn't let them to come to Akko. And some of them, they came to Akko, but they put it and they didn't want them to go to the beach. And, the Arab people in Akko and some of the Jews, they didn't like it. And we made like 2 demonstrations against that. And we worked very, very, very hard, Jews and Arabs, with the mayor, with the municipality, and then they decide to take it off. And they took it off and everything come back as usual.
Talk about the rising tensions that we know recently have been taken place in Akko. People are interested to hear about that. Perhaps before I ask one of the questions that's here, I know I'm interested to hear about what happened more than I've read in the newspapers, the story really behind the story. If you could help us on that, please.
Yeah, before, Bibi Netanyahu lose the government, he start acting against the Arab people in Jerusalem. And he sent 2 of Jewish members in the Knesset from the very, very wing right, Ben Gvir and Smotrich. And they start with Jerusalem. And after that, they start, they stop the buses to go to Jerusalem for the Muslim people to pray. They didn't let them go to pray to Jerusalem. And the right wing, they went to a village in Jerusalem called Sheikh Jarrah, and they start, go to the houses for the Palestinian housing, and they said, it's our house. And they start, kick out the people from the houses. And it's all this, and when it started with Jerusalem, with Al-Aqsa, and the people in Israel, especially the Muslim people, they got angry, And the violence, they start in Jerusalem and in Lud, Ramli, and Ben Gvir and Smotrich, they send 3 buses from young settlers to Akko to make problem in Akko. And everybody knows about it. And we spoke with the mayor and the police to stop them, not to let them come to Akko. But nobody stopped them. They came to Akko, and the police and the army, they were like taking care of them. They were, walking the street, this to the Arab, and very, very, bad things about the Arab. And the young Arabs, they didn't like it. And they start, throwing a stone on each other. The police, they start, stopping the Arab. They didn't stop any settlers who came from outside Akko. And when the kids, they got angry, and not all the kids, they are good kids. Some of them are criminals, and bad kids. They went to the old city and they start destroying all the shops, all the restaurants for the Jewish people in the old city. And also, they burned the Arab community center in the old city, and they burned the post office, which serves the Arab, And how this, started from this point, and we work very, very hard to make everything, peaceful and quiet. And because our community center, it's not belong to the city or the government, all the meeting we made in our community center, Jews and Arabs, religion people, political people, everybody must to come. We were more than 200 people every week meet and talk about it. And, the Jews in Akko, they knew the people who came and make the problems is the Jews who are from outside the city. And we didn't have problem with the Jews who lives inside the city. The problem was with the Jews, the settlers who came from the West Bank. They brought 3 buses, And unfortunately, the Arab kids, some of them, they made a lot of problem to the city. And now everything back normally because the Jews, nobody, attacked the Jews who lives in Akko. And they understood it's a problem with the outsider. And now, like I can tell you, 60%, 70% the people, the situation become normally, not 100% yet, but like 60, 70% become normally now.
Thank you, Fahili. If anybody wants to respond at any time, please unmute yourself and join the conversation. In the meantime, there's a question from David. Perhaps Claire could answer this one. In Akko, do Arab and Jewish children go to the same school or to different schools? Claire, perhaps you can.
Yeah, sure, I can answer that. In Israel, generally schools are separate. There are very, very few schools in Israel where Jews and Arabs go together. Certainly very, very few high schools. There are more primary schools. They are private. It's a problem. No two ways about it. It's a problem. But I have to say there are lots of initiatives to bring Jews and Arabs together within the curriculum. So they might go visit each other's schools and so on. And there are lots of other initiatives, but no, it is separate. And, there are several reasons why. For example, they speak different languages, which could be overcome, I should think. For example, also, separation in this country is not just amongst Jews and Arabs, it's amongst religious and secular. It's amongst, sometimes right wing and left wing in a way, depending on, Tel Aviv is called, the state of Tel Aviv. So separation is very normal here. And I think it's fundamentally a problem.
Yeah, I want to add something, it's like separated. But it's very, very good, high quality schools, Arabs, we have. The government and the mayor, they spend a lot of money, and we have the best schools in the area.
And now getting the best results, actually.
Yes,
one of the top schools.
Yes.
It is not that the Jewish schools are better, but it is separate, and it's really hard for us in the UK to get our heads around. On the other hand, I recently learned, to my shock, that it's the same in Northern Ireland.
It's Michael Reich here from London. Can I make a comment that both to Fahili and to Jenny? They both know me. Right.
Please
The
do.
Education Centre in Haifa, doesn't that have both Arab and Jews at the same school?
No, we don't have in Haifa a school for Jews and Arab. They're separated.
Hold on, I'd like to answer a little bit. There are certain schools, there are Arabs that go to Jewish schools, no two ways about it.
Yeah, yes.
But they walk into the Jewish school and they are celebrating Hanukkah and Purim and not Ramadan and not Eid, and they're speaking Hebrew, and it's their identity they leave at the front door, as it were. And I mean, there are a few schools. I did say right at the beginning there are a few. But it's really a handful, Michael.
Okay.
And Michael, you and I know very well about the school at Neve Shalom, Wahat al-Salam,
yes,
which is a role model for a lot of hand-in-hand schools. I believe there are at least six hand-in-hand mixed Jewish-Arab schools now in Israel. Would you verify that?
Yes, they have more daycare, and they have the first class and the second class. They start with it. It's inside the Jewish school. They don't have like Neve Shalom.
Not hand in hand. No, hand in hand does have, but most of them are elementary schools. They have a much harder time retaining the Jewish students when it comes to high school.
And why is that?
Oh goodness. I guess they have more choice, and it's more problematic in adolescent years. I wouldn't like to speak for the families.
Okay. There's a question from Sharon asking about the link with the Leo Beck School in Haifa with the Akko, with your project. Have you got a link with that, with the Leo Beck School?
No, we don't have it. You know, I visited Leo Beck. It's different from our school. Leo Beck, you know, for me, it's for the rich people. Arab and Jews, not for the poor kids.
It's a private school.
It's private and for the rich, not only private. Okay. You can see kids in high school goes with fancy car, brand new cars.
It's a private school.
It's private school, yes.
Okay, no, it must be.
Okay.
It's a very, very wonderful school as well, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's
question. Sorry, Michael, did you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to say it's linked to the reform movement in Israel, the Leo Beck Education Centre. Yeah.
Thank you. And Ruth has a question. Is there any form of twinning of Arab Jewish schools, like occasions when they actually get together, activities where they meet the others?
They do meet. I wouldn't call it twinning, but there are certainly connections between schools. So my children, for example, would go to Haifa to an Arab school, and they would come to visit them as well.
There's many meetings between schools. Yes.
Okay. Faye says, are there any positive changes that may be more positively formally taken into account to develop improvements avoided under Netanyahu with the new coalition government?
They work as a team and they are a new government. Let's give them a chance, you know. They've been like 2 months, you know, just let's give them the chance. And also the coronavirus, it's, you know, it's not easy to deal with it, you know, but the good things they are, you know, they have like a meeting, they are talking, not one person decide for the whole country.
Yeah, more democratic.
Nice.
Okay. Slave husband Terry has a question. The school has existed for a number of years now. Do you have contact with former pupils? And if so, how did their time with you affect their lives? Big question.
Well, you know, people, you know, after they finish school, especially the Jews one, they go to the army. After that, they go like half a year for a vacation around, and after that they start, going to universities. And unfortunately, the kids in Akko, especially the Jewish one, when they finish the army and they start, study, they leave Akko. They go to Tel Aviv. Everybody goes to Tel Aviv. I have three boys. Two of them, they work in Tel Aviv. Like, they work in Tel Aviv, and everybody leaves to Tel Aviv. Few people who stayed in Akko, but this is the situation.
But we do have families, Fahili, who they themselves were children and they send their children. Like, it's the obvious place for them to send their children, correct?
Yeah, but I want them to stay in Akko after they finish high school and army,
Okay, thank you. Now, Anne, who was trying to talk, has written down, and I'll read out what she says. The school, which is multicultural near to Sachin and Carmiel, is a very good work in progress with Arabs and Jews. I live on a mitzvah which has religious Jews with irreligious Jews. Today, some of the religious Jews want their kids to attend because all religious issues are offered. This seems to me to be the right direction. Lessons are in Hebrew and Arabic.
Well, we have good school in Misgav, but between Sachin and Carmel. They are, for many, many years, they are working together, Jews and Arab, and they spoke two languages at the school, the same like, Neve Shalom. And they are doing very well. Yes.
There just aren't enough of them, not even close.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Fahili, how the work you're doing is received within your family. How they and your friends and the community.
Without the support of the family, I couldn't succeed because I spent many, many hours in the center. My family support me, my kids support me, my friends they support me, and I start working with the community like 30 years ago. Today, I have more than 35% of the kids who come to the community center. Their parents, they were in the community center. They start when they are like 10 years, 11 years. After 20 years, they got married and they, went to study, and they brought their kids to the center, the daycare, and for the program. And everybody respect us. And in our community center, we don't have a security guy. It's safety place. And everybody respect.
And there's a question here about are there strong ethnic divides amongst Akko's Arab population?
I didn't understand the question.
Are there strong ethnic divisions? I think you touched on it before, really, amongst Akko's Arab population. The differences in views, in living, in coming to your center.
Well, no, like you see, like in Akko and everywhere, like, it's not everything, it's 100% right, like everywhere in the world, but, and, for me as an Israeli Arab who lives in Israel, and he was born here, and I have my family here, I don't feel that bad, in Israel. There is some, different between Jews and Arab, between Jews themselves, between Jews, from Ashkenazim, from Sephardi, they have it like in London, in America, and everywhere. You want to tell me like every place in the world, in UK or in America, everything is perfect, 100%? Israel the same, They have the good and they have the bad, but the majority is good, If you are a person, you want to live in peace and you want to make a family, and if you want to go to study, you can do it. Nobody stopped you, Yeah. Only we have problem like with jobs, with the security. But others, I have, kids in Tel Aviv, they are director, and they have more 100 workers in Tel Aviv, Jews, and my son is the director. If you want to make it, you can make it in Israel. There is some differently, it's okay, but I can tell you 80% we can live in peace in Israel. No problems.
There's a question here about products. Do products packaging have both languages on the labels, and do people shop in the same shops?
Well, we shop the same shops.
Yes.
But we have, the majority of the food, English and Hebrew, and some Arabic. But, some shops, they don't bring Arabs, project because not kosher. Not because they don't want, some of the shop not kosher, they have Arab project. But the majority, it's in Hebrew and in English. But we shop in the same place. We go to the same health department, we go to the same bank, we go to the same, post office, only the school are, separated.
And sometimes we're even friends, right, Fahili?
Yes. Only the school separated, but the other, universities, mixed. Everything is mixed, in Israel. No problem. You can go, you can walk, and you can buy from. We have, many Jewish people who go to the West Bank and make shopping in West Bank because it's a free and good quality also.
And I can also say that it's absolutely very easy to find halal meat. There are so many Arab butchers, right, Fahili? Because
yes.
Arabs enjoy their meat.
The meat, if you are not halal, nobody will. Even the Muslims, they don't buy from it. You have to be halal.
Oh.
But actually, kosher meat is also halal, by the way.
Yes.
Okay. So you've answered the question, is it easy for Arabs to find halal meat? You've answered that.
Yes.
Leslie has a question, but it's only half a question. Maybe Leslie could unmute and ask the question themselves. It's about Renana. And
it wasn't a question. It's a statement.
Right.
We live in Renana, and our greengrocer, the one that we go to, is an Arab Israeli, and he has a Tudat Kashrut.
Yep.
So that means that he's sells halal and kosher food.
Yes.
My brother, he lives in Bonn. He goes and buy his meat from Jewish, kosher place. There is a lot of kosher places in Israel. No problem.
Okay, so have we any more questions? Any more responses? Heidi, did you want to speak? Could you unmute yourself, please? Just unmute yourself.
Yes.
Thank you, Heidi.
Sorry. No, this is not necessarily relevant to what we've discussed, but when we went to Neve Shalom, Mahad Alam, a couple of years ago, the young people, the children were all educated in Arabic and Hebrew, but the young people we met, secondary education, was there a school nearby where they spoke both languages, or did you have to go to separate schools? The one the group of youngsters we met.
Yeah, after the primary school, then the children went to separate schools, but they are hoping to build eventually a high school at Neve Shalom Wahat al-Salam. But Claire's involved with a high school where Arab and Jewish children go. Maybe you could tell us more about that, because we've been thinking more about primary schools probably.
So in the vicinity of Neve Shalom, there's no high school where they speak or educate in two languages. It has to be separate. Is that it? Yeah.
I believe, that there are now more and more Hebrew is being taught in Arab schools and Arabic in Jewish schools.
Right. Thank you.
Again, Claire could perhaps knows much more about it than I do.
Okay. So I have another hat. My heart is definitely with Fahili in the community centre, but a few years ago, I also, understanding the importance of bringing young people together and wanting to do it in a slightly different way, I was involved in the setting up of a boarding school, a high school, which would be English speaking, actually. English speaking because it is a neutral language, and half of the students are Israelis, half Arab and half Jews, and half of them are from 24 different countries around the world. And the idea behind the school is that the students are learning conflict resolution skills, diplomacy skills, listening skills, as well as studying for the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. And it's very unusual. It's very unusual, but I'm happy to answer any questions, but perhaps not today, Jenny. But I'm happy to introduce anyone to it at another time.
I wanted to add something about school. I saw, many people, they ask about schools, If you ask me, I prefer to go to one school and learn in Hebrew, not in two schools, and not in one school, Hebrew and Arabic. We are living in Israel. The main language is the Hebrew, and the university is in Hebrew. Most of the work, it's in Hebrew, It's good to have one school, one language, and also we can add for the Jews and for the Arabs, they learn about each other, Like in London, you have one school. In America, they have one school. The Arab and the Jews and the Christians, they go to one school and they learn English. I prefer in Israel to have one school to be Hebrew, and the Arabs, they can learn also about themselves through the Hebrew, and the Jews, they will learn about the Arab. We learn about the Jews a lot. The Jews, they don't learn about us at all, We know a lot about the Jews, When I finished my high school, I made the exam, the final exam was the Tanakh. I had to study the Tanakh, We learn a lot about the Jews. I prefer one language, one school, and equal learning for both of them,
But I have to say that's politically it's not considered politically correct, that it's very much considered amongst, and I'm sure Jenny, amongst people involved in this in this work, that it's very important to be able to speak your language. I think that your view is very pragmatic, Fahili, but it's not necessarily that popular. But I understand it completely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Two people have their hands up, Wally and Michael. Could we start with Wally, please? Could you unmute yourself, please, Wally?
What's your vision for the future? Do you see projects you want to develop? Do you see things you want to move on and make even better than what you're already doing?
Well,
looking like 5 years ahead or something like that?
I've been for 30 years making this work. And, as I told you, many of the kids, they start when they were 10 years old. Now their kids comes back to the center, and then the center, As much we can, to do in the center we can do, we encourage many kids, Jews and Arabs, especially the poorest, to go to have a high education in university, or even they can find a job. I can tell you many kids through the 30 years, they did well. Some of them, they went to university, some they went to college, some of them they went and studied some professional work, and they're doing well. I'm going to continue in my work. I'm going to focus on my work. I'm going to give education for these poor kids, because if we don't give them this education, nobody will give them. Nobody will give them. They cannot go and afford it, The center has been 30 years. I'm going to continue in my work. I'm happy in my work. I can see the result in my work, the families and the kids, how they doing after, finish high school, after they go to the army and, working and doing well. It's for me, it's enough, That's what I want.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now Michael, please.
Okay, it's 2 points. First of all, Fahili, do you still make the best fried fish in Akko?
Yes.
So it was a wonderful meal we had at your place many years ago.
Yes.
And secondly, do you work with the Abraham Initiative on the teaching in schools in both Arab and in Jewish schools, vice versa?
No, we don't work with them, because I think they work with like academy projects.
They're in the Ministry of Education. They work with the Ministry of Education. We're not connected with the Ministry of Education.
No.
Okay, fine.
I must say, that's something that does sadden me, that there are so many initiatives in Israel, but I suppose it's expedient because you're all trying to raise funds, but you don't really work together. And that's a little bit about what TalkMatters is about. I'm trying to show as many initiatives as possible and try to get the organisers of those initiatives to work together, to cooperate, to share resources, etc., etc. But it's very easy for me to say that because I'm not involved with fundraising, which I know is the hard thing. If
we do cooperate with several organisations. That one's not relevant because we're not a school, but we do cooperate with several organisations who do the same kind of work. Including at one point Hand in Hand, who were looking at the possibility of using us as the basis of a community to start a school. But unfortunately, they decided Akko wasn't the place they wanted to be at that time. But we will cooperate. I know Fahili is a great believer in cooperating with anyone who has the same vision. And in fact, at the centre, I can say honestly that any organisation that has the same kind of goals that we have, he will give the space for free. He doesn't charge anything. So
that's brilliant. Yes. So my experience of working with Neve Shalom Wahat al-Salam, particularly in the early years, was very different. I think now there probably is more cooperation, but still not enough in my opinion. Anyway, we are nearly at our going away home time. Anybody else have anything else that you particularly want to say that's on your mind? Or if you don't want to say it now, maybe you can send a note to Claire or to Fahili or to myself. First of all, I want to thank you, Claire and Fahili, as ever, for your inspirational talks. And more than thanking you for that, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, which is really, really, as you know, and as I know, so important. I think that there's certainly a message for us all here to talk about what we've heard this evening, not to be silent, to tell our friends and colleagues about the great work that you're doing and the inspirational people that you are, to talk about it. We have a responsibility really to support initiatives like these, because it's the only way in such a complex, difficult situation. It's the only way that we can start to build trust, to start with Jews and Arabs getting to know each other, getting to talk together, and hopefully being there when eventually we get some sort of solution to the problems that you have at the moment. So thank you all. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Healy. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Daniel and Georgiana, for all your help.